Hello, everybody. It's 167 of us, so I think it's time that we start. For today, this is the content of the webinar. First of all, two new things regarding memoQWeb, the import folder structure and how assignment works now. And then I think the most exciting part, which is more operations with multiple resources, and then a little bit of working together. So let's jump into it. Import folder structure in memoQWeb. So I'm calling it like this because it is the same thing that you do in the client, where it is called import folder structure. On the web, the way you can do it is that you import a zip file. This is what you have to drop into the browser, because that's how browsers work. And now if you do it, the default action is that memoQWeb deals with it as if it was an import folder structure. And this is what you see. You can see the structure itself, and you can see the colored icons for some of the sorry, I'm struggling a bit. Yeah, okay. So you can see colored icons for some of the file formats, and you can, as you see, this is the new option, which is called group by path. Okay, yeah, I'm sorry, my mouse. Okay, well, this highlighter thing doesn't want to work. So this is group by path. And obviously you can select the content of a folder with one click, which practically means that the folder and all of its children are selected. You can, of course, change the selection later on. You can do actions with this selection. And you can also change another grouping, which is group by file type, which can also make sense if there is for example, for all the HTML files, you want to choose a different filter configuration, or if you want to change how they are imported. For example, they are only needed into one of the project's target languages. So, and of course, you still have the flat option, just showing the files in a list, basically. And now that we imported all these files, oh yeah, I wanted to emphasize it that the other way of importing a zip, which is using the zip filter, is of course still available. You just have to choose zip filter as the filter configuration for the zip file. So if you check it here the filter config is set as import as folder, which is the default option, but you can always choose the zip filter. So now that we imported all these bunch of files, let's assign them. Currently, in up to 9.3, you could only do it one by one. With 9.4, you can do a bunch of batch operations with them. Only the simple type of assignment so far. So no tricky first accept, distribute, and nothing like that, but you can do simple assignment from this table. So I have these millions of files. Let's say I want to assign each Klingon file to myself. So what I do is I filter for the Klingon target language. And here, after just clicking here, this opens up and I can choose myself as a translator for all these files, all the selected files, which is fine. I can do this. And now I assigned all of the files to a translator. But then it turns out that there is some issue with the HTML files. So the translators working on them need a bit of deadline extension. Please note that the HTML files, for which I filtered here, they have 3 different assignees. So now comes the part that is extra that you cannot do in the client currently, in the desktop client. By clicking here in the deadline area, you can change only the deadline for all the selected files. So now if I change it to, well, a week later, then as you see, the assignees didn't change, only the deadline, only for these files. I think this will be appreciated for people who work a lot with projects with multiple languages and multiple linguists. And a third thing, it turned out that the Piglet Excel file was already translated basically before it was imported, so it's already done. We can also bulk change the status of a couple of files. Now I filtered based on the name, and then I just click here and change the status to document is completed. And now the status of these 2 files and nothing else is changed to completed. This is again, of course, can be done by just clicking through all the files that you want to change. These were just some options how you can filter the files. And now, our star of the show, in my personal opinion, more operations with multiple resources, and over to George.
All right, I'm here. So taking over the screen, hopefully. Let me see.
Aha.
Can you see it?
Uh-huh.
All right. Let's just start the presentation view. Oops, I should have gone there, but I'll be there in a second. All right. Some of you guys wrote in the Q&A that you have some sound issues. I'm sorry, we really don't know what to do because Veronica, Damien, and myself, the 3 panelists, are at 3 different locations, and we can hear each other loud and clear, and Damien is even in another country. So please check your Zoom settings and computer audio settings. We should be audible and visible. All right, so more operations with multiple resources. Just to give you a background, we normally use the phrase batch operations because we do things with batches of resources. So if I use the phrase batch operations, it pretty much means the very same thing. If you remember, back in 9.3, memoQ 9.3, we started out with 2 batch operations, adding and removing translation memories and turn bases in projects in batch. We are now continuing with live docs. So now you can basically just select as many live docs corpora as you want within a project, and then you can use either the icons on the ribbon or the context menu icons to use those resources, all of those selected resources in the project, or if they have been already added to the project, you can remove them from the project. So it's pretty much just continuation of what has already been available to translation memories with memories and turn bases. But that's not all of it. So don't worry, it's not the end. But before we move on, I just want to emphasize that, in my opinion, live docs is probably one of the most underrated features of memoQ. So I would encourage everyone, especially now that you're looking at the screen, that you should check out our help page or our webinars, and also there are some invaluable YouTube videos with the ins and outs of live docs feature in memoQ. I, as a translator, have used it extensively, and there are just so many things you can do with it. So I would just encourage everyone to go back and revisit live docs. But moving on to batch operations. So now what you can do is you can select, add, and remove multiple resources in different ways, not just simply by using Control and Shift and clicking, but also some other means. We listened to our users, so right after the 9.3 demo, we had some feedback from our users and they wanted some additional options to be able to add and remove these resources in projects. So we added 3 options. One is we added in the top left corner of the table, you can see a checkbox. It's called Use Remove All. If you click on it, and then you select and add all of the resources that are displayed in the table, or next click would remove them, and then once again, it would just cycle back and forth. So that's one helpful thing. We also added a select all context menu item. So those of you who are not familiar with the Control Shift A that selects all the resources, then you can just use this context menu icon. So right click anywhere inside the table and then click select all. And then you can use the use in project or remove from project icons, obviously. The third option is also something that was requested by one of our users. If you select multiple resources, like in this example, you have 3 of these selected, and then you click inside the checkbox of one of those resources, then depending on the status of the checkboxes, or that particular checkbox, it will change the status of all the others in the selection. So if in this particular case, I clicked inside this doc test translation memory and check the checkbox, then all 3 would be added to the project. So I think hopefully now everyone would be happy to be able to select and add or remove these resources in projects. But let's move on because we have a ton of other stuff to talk about. One issue that we have been faced with was that it was not so easy to find the right resources when adding them to our projects. So we talked and we had some brainstorming sessions and we ended up implementing some new parameters for TMs, TBs, and LiveDocs corpora. Namely, we have last modified, which actually has been available with term basis, but not with the other 2. Last used, that is last used in a project, and then whether that particular resource is used in a project or not. Also, we implemented what's called size, and we now display it in the search and filter bar, which is available not only in projects, but also in Resource Console. And also when you create your templates, you will see these options as well. In addition to these, we have a number of sorting options. All the headers, all the column headers can be now clicked and they will sort the resources. For instance, in the screenshot, you can see I clicked entries and then resource with the highest number of entries is displayed on top and in the descending order. One cool thing is also, if you look at the last modified dropdown, we actually listed 4 settings that we believe would be probably the most useful for, especially for LSPs, but also for freelancers, to list those resources that have not been modified or used more than a month ago, or 3 months ago, 6 months ago, 1 year ago. But if it's not something that you would like to see, you would want to see what is something that you have not touched, say, for 2 years, then you can just select the custom date option, and then a calendar will pop up and you can define the starting and the ending date of that period that you want to filter for. Also in the size fields, You can just leave everything empty and then everything will be listed, or you can just define the minimum size, and then obviously only the resources that have entries that have more entries than the minimum size would be listed, or you can define just the maximum size, or you can define both the minimum and the maximum, so that you can define a range, say between 100 entries and 1,000 entries. Another good piece of news is that WS API support is available for these new parameters. So please check out our API documentation and you will see all the details there. And now you have seen the filters and you have seen these sorting options. So this is how it looks like in the resource console. In order for us to be able to accommodate all these parameters and make them available, not only within projects, but also in the resource console. This is how it looks like. And we did it because we believe it's time to clean up, get rid of those zombies or bury them as we put it in the blog post. We called zombies those resources that have not been used for some time or have not been touched or are never in projects, or maybe they are empty. Now, previously, before 9.4, if you wanted to clean up your resource console and get rid of those unused resources, you would have to open those resources one by one and then check out, or either check out at the bottom these pieces of information, or you had to click on the properties and then check the properties dialog. What we are doing right now is we are putting everything here, including these new parameters that I just talked about. So it's really easy for freelance translators to organize their resources that are available on their computer, or for LSP and enterprise customers, they can just select the server URL, and then they can filter for whatever they want to, or they can just simply organize or sort their resources by entries. So then they can delete all those that have 0 entries in them, or they can just check by last used or last modified dates. Mind you, these are dates only to avoid overworking the server. So these are dates, the days that we display. So you can just select and sort your resources by these dates and then determine which ones you need to get rid of or which one you actually need for a specific project. If you have something like 2 or 3 resources with similar names, but you know that one you used like a week ago, obviously then the last used value will tell you about that. One thing I want to mention is that you can see that not available and /a is shown here. And this is going to apply both for local and server resources. What it means is that in order for us to be able to display these values, these resources will need to be used to be shown under the last used column that is added to a project, for instance, or to get something here for last modified for TMs and live docs, because like I said, Termbases already had this last modified implemented. So in order for you to be able to see this last modified value, you need to have them changed at least once. So if you edit, say, an entry in a Termbase, then you will see that the last modified date will change immediately. So the more you use your servers, the more up-to-date these figures will be. So I assume that if, for instance, you upgrade to 9.4 and you revisit your resource console in a month or so, and you can see that there are still resources that have not been modified or used for the past month or so, then you may need to think about removing those resources from the server to save space and to avoid any confusion, especially with resources with similar names. So it's a pretty neat housekeeping tool, I would say. We didn't stop there. So in addition to being able to add, remove, and select these resources, now you can also export and or delete multiple TMs, TBs, and LiveDocs corpora. The way it works is that if you select multiple resources, either from within the project or using the resource console, and then you click export, then you will just need to provide a folder name or designate a folder, and all the TMs or TBs and LiveDocs would be exported into that folder. If you click delete, however, it's a little trickier. First of all, we need to see if you have permission to do that. That is to delete those resources. Obviously, if you're working on your computer, under My Computer, you have administrator rights, so you can delete your own term bases and whatnot. But if you're on a server, then it's the group properties under the server administrator, where members of the administrator's user group can define which groups can delete resources in batch. As you can see here, the project managers by default cannot. And this is a conscious decision. So in order for you to enable your PMs to be able to delete resources in batch, one of your administrator users would have to get into this interface and then authorize the project managers group to do that, or create a specific group and then maybe something like, I don't know, Power PM or whatever, and then you can add your senior project managers that you trust and you're not afraid of them being able to delete multiple resources accidentally. So it's up to you. I also want to emphasize that the same applies to the web, to the memoQWeb web PM interface. As you can see, we also have the very same checkbox here. So and this is a change in behavior compared to the previous versions. Previously, because we didn't have this setting, by default on the web, project managers were able to delete multiple resources. But now, in order to synchronize the client and the web PM interface, we implemented the same behavior. So once again, if you're using the memoQ web PM interface, one of your administrator users would have to get into administration groups and then select the relevant user group and then authorize this option right here and then save the setting. Going back to the dialog that you can see on the left, this delete multiple resources. When you click delete, then we have a number of checks, whether it's a QTerm term base, whether you have permission to delete those term bases or resources, whether you have permission for the specific server, whether that's the same server that we are talking about. So if it's a pinned resource from another server, it cannot be deleted from that interface. So we are doing a lot of background checks, and we also check obviously if resources are in projects, and we communicate all these restrictions and warnings here. In this particular example, my selection included 3 translation memories that are still being used in projects. So I was warned, and I have to make a decision here. As you can see, before you delete anything, we offer the option to export resources before deleting. If you click this, then the button will change. Also, if you click this, then the button, the label on the button will change. So it's a dynamic button. Basically, you can only delete the resources if you have all the permissions and at least you agree to the last bit, that you understand that deleting the resource is permanent and cannot be undone later. So we try to do it like foolproof to avoid any mishaps. So hopefully you will appreciate this feature. We try to make it as safe as possible, and we let you decide which user groups can delete these resources in batch. One cool thing that we also include in 9.4 is importing multiple TM export files. As you can see, I want to emphasize that another cool feature is that you can import SDLTM files in 9.4, either as separate single files or as part of this multiple TM import feature. If you click on the import button, either in the resource console or in a project, and then in the folder that opens up, you select multiple TM files, TMX, CSV, or SDLTM files, and you have this wizard pop up. You can select three options. One is to import all selected files to the specific TM that you had selected on the previous screen, or you can choose to import all selected files into a new translation memory, in which case you need to specify if it's on your computer or the server, and then obviously you need to create a brand new TM. So it's the second scenario. The third scenario is if you selected, say, 5 different files, TMX, CSV, SDLTM files, you have the third option to create brand new TMs for every single translation memory file. And there are some additional options that you need to specify, say for CSV files, you need to select the language. But after that, the next button is enabled. And then you find yourself on the import TM files wizard screen. It's very similar to the file import screen. So you have like a summary of all the files that you selected. You can still change your mind and then maybe not import all of them. You can change settings here. You have warnings if anything is missing here. Obviously, I failed to provide the right languages here, or maybe the instead of tab, I need to select like a comma as a separator. But it's very clearly communicated if there's any action that's needed. If it's an error, then you get a red triangle and you cannot proceed with the import. If it's just a warning, then you obviously get a yellow triangle and you can proceed with the import, but you will probably get some warnings later on as well. So it's a pretty cool feature, and hopefully many of you will enjoy this. Now let's move on to our other theme, working together. I'd like to talk to you about machine translation briefly, as we are already half an hour into the presentation. We have some plugins, empty plugins that we have updated. The most notable of which is the Intento plugin. Intento as a translation or machine translation aggregator was introduced in memoQ as a public MT plugin in version 9.1, and this is their first update inside memoQ. You probably know that Intento has its own private plugin, so they have been developing their plugin in the meantime, and now they've reached a point where they believe that it's time to change the publicly available plugin inside memoQ. So, so this is exactly what we did. We have a probably a more user-friendly user interface. We have additional options that you can use. We had some issues with translating tag documents, and those have been fixed. So if you're translating with MT providers that support XML files, then you probably get better results with Intento. They also fixed some smart routing issues that they had in the past, and now they are supporting HTTP proxy via the Intento plugin. So there are a number of options that you can take advantage of. And the performance of the plugin has also improved. So please give it a try and then see for yourself. I really recommend using Intento. They have some really cool features, one of which is smart routing, as we mentioned before. Another MT plugin that we updated is Tilde, and the most notable change in their case is support for Norwegian languages. So it's supposed to work now better. So that's why you can see here the Norwegian target language selected. Another welcome addition to the MT options is in the Microsoft MT plugin settings. As you can see in the lower section of the screen, there's a setting skip segments, and you can then activate this by clicking the regular expression checkbox, and you can type in a regular expression phrase. And what it does is, just like in the Google MT plugin, if memoQ encounters a segment that matches this regular expression, then those segments will not be sent. That is, they will be skipped as far as MT translation goes. This obviously will save money on your end. Sometimes, it doesn't make sense to send sentences like memoQ 9.4.3 to an MT service provider. So memoQ in those cases will skip any of those segments where only the memoQ word is there with the version number. And also you can skip segments where the number of tags is more than a specific number that you set here at the lower end of the screen. One last thing I want to talk to you about before I hand it back to Veronica is that now it's easier to test your own plugin on your server. This is a section from our MT SDK. So please check out our MT SDK. It has been updated. The 9.4 version has a specific chapter that tells you exactly how you can test your plugin without the need to submit the plugin for signing by memoQ. So if you create a plugin, you can immediately test it. At first try, memoQ will log an issue in the server log. So if you check that out, it will tell you exactly where and what you need to do to be able to test your plugin immediately on the server. This will hopefully cut down on turnover times, so you can develop and test your plugins at a much faster pace without need to make several rounds with us in that regard. So I hope you will enjoy this feature as well. And now back to Veronica before we move to the Q&A section.
Yeah, right. We have about 1 million questions. So I would like to, first of all, I would like to say one sentence about Content Connector. If you are a Content Connector user, it just became easier to create a new connector for Content Connector. But I think that in our current audience, this is not a very popular topic. Whereas I was trying to handle the questions while you were talking, Joel, and I have to say that I thanked and closed about, I don't know, 5 or 10, this is awesome, thank you, type of questions. So please read through them later on, because it will give you a warm and fuzzy feeling. And I would also like to excuse some of the questions that were more like feature requests. I dismissed them all too, because basically all the questions are to Joel, and we have about 9 minutes, and it's 19 questions now. So I tried to make it a little easier for him. Mm-hmm. Yeah, both MT and these batch resources things are his baby, so I will give the floor to him. And even the dismissed questions, we will answer them in writing. Okay, and excuse us for not having the time for it this time. So Joel.
So we have some questions with private MT plugins from Claire. I'm not sure what exactly she means, but I'd say just feel free to contact me, and I'll direct you to the person. But first of all, you need to check our empty SDK that's available from our website. We have SDK integrations on memoQ.com, and so let's move on then. Then we have what exactly means last used. Okay, last used for the resources means the last time the resource was used, say for lookup. So for instance, if a resource was attached to a project and a lookup operation was done, which means that basically at every single segment you have a lookup operation for a TM and turn-based and live docs, then it means that that will trigger a change in the date. So that will set the date to the current date. And if you go back there 24 hours later and you use the very same project, then this last use date will change to the following day. Okay, so that's what it means. Can I register all resources, TMTB, etc., in a single operation, or do I have to find and select each resource individually? Registering is not something that's being supported here. So we took a look at the and I'm not sure we could do that. I think we did investigate that. What we did was we had a ton of interviews and checked out so many different sources and concluded that what our users really needed was to be able to add and remove these resources in projects, be able to delete them, export them, and for translation memories, the batch import was a really strong feature that a lot of people requested. All right, is it possible to export TMs into one target files if the languages match, obviously? No, the export feature simply just exports the TMs into separate files, but obviously you can combine them. I mean, once you have them exported, then with this new import TM feature, you can have all those TMs imported at once into a single file if you want to. Every TM shows NA for me, but I modified and used some of these TMs today with memoQ 9.4. What might be the problem? I'd say come back tomorrow. This sounds silly, but because there is some delay in registering these dates, we basically the primary functionality of this of these new parameters is to be able to show you the dates and not the time. So therefore, if your date is different than the one that you last used or modified, then you should be able to see it. So revisit, please, tomorrow. All right. Yes, Richard already linked the WSAPI documentation. Thank you, Richard. So those of you who are interested in using these new parameters for the resources in WSAPI, please follow the link in the question and answers. All right. Are all of those, some of these options also going to appear in the translation version, like batch operations for live docs? Yes. The only difference is that obviously as a translator, you can only work on your own computer or whatever resources you have access to. So yes, all these features are available for the translators as well. If you accidentally delete the resource, is there a possibility to retrieve them back? No, this is why we made that dialog kind of foolproof, and this is why we offer by default the export option to avoid this mishap. Deleting a resource is final, and this has been actually communicated in the WebPM interface. So we are now in sync, and we make sure that our users understand that once they delete something, it's final. So that's why we encourage them to export the files or export the content of those resources before they delete them. Is the Microsoft MT plugin the only one offering the regex skip option? No, Google MT plugin has already had it. At least that one that I can recall right off the top of my head. Feel free to stop me, Veve, if our time is up. We have 1, 2, 3.
Sorry, I'm just really trying to answer what I can in writing and what I feel is not relevant for all the participants. We have 2 more minutes.
All right.
And you're doing great.
Okay, the Intento plugin is available. You don't have to buy it, but in order for you to be able to use it, you have to register with Intento, and you have to pay, obviously, as a usage fee when you translate using their plugins. But the plugin itself is there. Online help about pseudo feature in recent memoQ server versions. It would be very helpful. Is it the pseudo empty? I'm not sure, but our help should be.
Yeah, I'm just
sufficient.
I'm just looking for for the link. So
I love the new features. Okay, the client available if the server is still on version. Okay, in order for you to be able to see these new parameters, the server also has to be on 9.4. Otherwise, we cannot retrieve those new parameters. So the old servers will not know these last used dates, for instance, but the last modified for term bases have been around. That value has been around for some time. So yes, as far as servers, if you want to have the whole 9 yards with all the 4 parameters, please install 9.4. But we do have cross compatibility, so you can use the new client with the old server. You will just see different things. Do I have
one more? Just select the last, your favorite one.
Okay, let's see.
Can exported resources be retrieved? For example, I think that is yeah.
Exported resources retrieve. I guess what it means is to import those back that has been exported. Yes, sure. You can import them back once the resources are deleted and they have not been exported. Then they are lost for good. So this is why, once again, I want to warn everyone that before you delete your resources, please think it through whether you will ever need them. And if there's any slight chance that you will use them in the future, at least export them into a file and then you can re-import them later. We will.
Okay, so I will have to be cruel now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would like to thank you, Zsolt, and all the attendees for this very active participation, and I really appreciate everybody's kind words, and thank you. This was again a record webinar, which makes us very proud and happy, and we are very, very happy to have you as users, and it's really great to feel like we are part of a community. So thank you, and see you again in 9.5.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.